first, a couple of things. I'm going to add just 5 minutes, an additional meditation instruction. Typically, meditation instructions are only added during the new ones in the morning session. Since we don't have all that many days, we want to just put a little short additional piece on. It'll take 5 minutes. And then I'll switch, over into something different. But before we do that, even, I want to just say something about, it's come up in some of the interviews about a couple of people for whom it would really be supportive for their body to be able to lie down meditation. And one person shared something which is a common feeling about, well, you're not really supposed to lie down and it's less than, or I don't know, felt some kind of pressure to not lie down. I don't know if someone told them that or where they got that, but I just want to be very clear that not only is lying down, there's only 4 postures I know you can be in: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. Actually, the tradition tells a story that Ananda, or one of the people who around the time of the Buddha, we get these stories, so maybe it really happened, had been practicing and finally gave up and got up from sitting to standing, and on the way, so they're in between sitting and standing, had some kind of great enlightenment happen. I guess they just let go and given up and something. So I guess there's a in-between postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. They're all just equally good. We tend to mostly sit, and that's fine. I didn't really mention in the group, but anytime you want, in the middle of a sitting, just quietly stand up. If your body needs it, or if you're just sleepy or something, it can help. You can open your eyes even if you want, and continue just meditating as you had been. It's just called standing meditation. So just to be aware, I want to just kind of normalize that there's a couple of people for whom they'll have to decide, but I'm encouraging to actually lie down, bring a pad and lie down. So just to know that's going to happen. And every time I'm on a retreat and I see people lying down, I actually feel really happy because I know they're taking care of themselves. So I notice here, like for example, there's some space over here. So to me, without having to get people back in the corner back there's some space. If you're near the door, I don't know if that works for you, bring your pads here. I think hopefully it's fine to be up near the front here. People do that all the time. Maybe not over here as people are coming and going, but, and if you need help, let us know. We'll help you get settled. So we just wanted to say that about lying down meditation. Okay. So let me just, so this is just adding on to the meditation instruction. So far, the instruction this morning was about working with some primary meditation object, putting your attention on your breathing or whatever else you're doing. And we keep coming back to that. And that's a training of our minds to learn how to, it helps the mind settle for many people. Not everybody's doing that practice as I'm learning, but something like that probably for most of us. And I've said there's so many other things going on in our experience, and let them be in the background. Well, many of you already know that sometimes these things don't stay in the background. Whatever's going on in the body, maybe the pain is getting stronger. Or we can have memories. It can be emotions, feelings, moods, thoughts that can be strong and compelling there. So during those times, you have some choices. Sometimes, depending on what's happening, you may want to up the effort to still stay kind of pushing harder just to stay with your breath. And it can be like that sometime, and that's fine. You'll feel that out. But be careful about that, because if something else is happening, it's really the present moment is saying to you, pay attention to this. This is something here. And maybe what it's saying is now's not the time to be with the breath. For right now, we need to work skillfully with whatever else is happening. And so there could be there's a couple of ways to do that. Some of you have been taught in a way where you just let go of the breath completely, and this new experience is, I don't know, would be the new primary object is a way you could say it. The knee pain or the pain in your back. I mean, obviously you want to do what you can to take care of it first, but then you work with it. Or just stay with this anger or this grief or this fear or whatever it is that's coming, or joy. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. And we just stay with the feeling and work with it, and however you do. I'm just saying this briefly. I can talk to you more about, well, how do you really work with these or be with them? We know it can be like that. And then when it settles out, or you just need a break, you come back to your breath when you're ready. Okay. So just to know we're now expanding, we're still giving pretty strong, the way I'm offering it is pretty strong preference to still giving the breath, pretty strong preference. So but we don't want to end up clinging on to it and being fighting with ourselves. So we have to feel for ourselves when it's time to shift. There is another way that you can experiment, and I'll just offer it, and you can see when something else is strong. So what we've been doing, I call it mindfulness of breathing. If something else is strong, you could experiment with what I call mindfulness with breathing. What is it like to breathe with this back pain, with this anger, with this grief, right? And so what you're doing is it's just a different feeling than letting go of the breath completely and being fully just on this. You're actually letting the awareness of the breathing be there with it. And so let me just say a couple more things, because you have to feel out, well, how would you do that? It may not work for you, so you have to try it and see if you like it. It's not splitting your attention. Sometimes it's just like both are there kind of in your awareness together. The breathing's there, the knee pain is there, but sometimes it can also have a feeling like I'm breathing into the knee pain, into the anger, or whatever like that. And so you'll feel if the way I'm articulating it makes any sense or not. And I know this is brief. I just wanted to put it out there, all these different ways you can work. But anyway, and so I'll talk to you more, but just if these are of interest, you can play with it. Don't overstress your mind, like, oh, I don't get this breathing with, forget that. So that's that. And I think later today, there might be some time for some questions. And if that comes up, or in the morning, we could explore it more if you want. But that's that. Just a little quick thing. Okay. Okay. Now let's let that go. And just shift now. And so now I have this is the talk for today. I think I mentioned tomorrow we're going to start to shift into what happens around the deepening of the concentration. What is concentration? How do we practice so that it's going to shift tomorrow? That's the talk a lot. I have a rule of thumb on retreats that at any given time, a third of us are in heaven, a third of us are in hell, and a third of us are somewhere in between. And we're all moving in and out of those categories all the time. Right? So it can be like this. And difficulties can come up anytime. Those of you who are experienced with retreats know that. But I think I can't remember if I mentioned, but might be a repeat. The first day, the first couple of days doesn't have to be, but can be particularly challenging for some of us. Might be. You come on retreat. It's interesting. Think about it. You come here and you get the feeling, what am I saying? It's like create a bubble of love. That's a kind of a nice space to be in. I don't know how much hopefully we're getting some feeling like that. Make yourself comfortable. Take care of it yourself. Get your needs met. Find any posture you want. Customize the schedule for yourself. And you don't have to make anything happen. Just be present with whatever else is happening. And we see how hard that can be. Sometimes, not everyone. Just to be present with ourselves can be hard. And if it's not now, we'll all have times where it can be challenging. Just to let ourselves be can be like that. And so some of you might know, I'm I'm having that now. For some of you, it's not like that, right? Um, I remember um, when my wife had been, this was years ago, she was away like on like a 2-month retreat, and something like that. And we had a little contact here and there, call once a week, but I didn't really know what's going on. So she came back and I said, "How was your retreat?" I don't know what I thought she was going to tell me she's all blissed out or whatever, which that can happen. And that's important. And we'll talk about that. That's a part of it for sure. First thing out of her mouth, she'd been meditating like decades and decades. She'd been on many retreats. She knew what it's all about. First thing out of her mouth was, I don't know if this meditation's all that great. And I said, okay, what's happening? She literally said something like, I mean, do I have to feel everything? Like, do I have to see everything? And she said, there's things in there I didn't want to know was in there. Right? I guess that it can feel like that sometimes. Right. Now, really, of course, if there's things in there, we do want to know, because if they're not in our consciousness, they're still working on us. And then, just to try to be humorous, she said something like, I mean, maybe you go through all of life totally unconscious. You don't feel anything. You don't see nothing. And then maybe just before you die, there's one moment of shit, and then you're dead. And it'd be better to live kind of numbed out. But here, we're actually doing the opposite. We're purposely doing practices, different techniques. We'll talk tomorrow. There's a range of goals. We don't all have the same goals, so what we're aiming for. We might have ideas of liberation. We hear these words, enlightenment, awakening, many connotations to what we mean. You may or may not even think in those terms. We're all over the place, right? But look at what we're doing. We're all here, and in this particular form on this retreat, we're being still and quiet. Few of us might be meditating with our eyes open, but most of us are closing our eyes. We're bringing our attention in. So it shouldn't surprise us that we're going to connect with what's there, because that's what we're doing. They put the poster up, come on retreat, get inner peace. If we told you what actually happened, you wouldn't show up. So so look, I know some of us are having a peaceful time. Some of us have an easier time. There's this quote. I wish I'd brought my quote book from Goenka. Some of you know who he was. He's no longer alive. And he talks about, I wish I could, I can't remember that. It was a beautiful poetic way of saying, real peace and happiness is really getting that things are impermanent and are always changing. And it helps us really get that about the liberation, the freedom comes from letting go and non-clinging. When we really get that, that's kind of the insight side of the practice that we'll talk more about, right? And so we hear that, I don't know about you, I hear that and it sounds so good and go, yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to sign up for that, this letting go and non-clinging. And what happens? First thing you realize is you can't do it. I mean, you can do it in a moment, right? But all it takes is the right causes and conditions to come together, isn't it true? And you're just hooked right back again. And sometimes we even know it, and we haven't found the key, right? So, when these challenges, look, eventually we all know this, right? We're all fellow sufferers. Maybe that's kind of I don't know. Think about it. Hopefully that's not the whole story. Now I have to be very careful. I don't want to trigger anyone off. Depending on what you're dealing with in your own life, you may not get much happiness and joy these days if you're going through chronic pain or or depressions or different things, So I hope all of us at least some point in life have experienced happiness and joy too. But it's a mix for each of us depending on our life situation. But certainly, even for the best situations, we all know what it is to suffer. It's hopefully not the whole picture. We all know that we're all eventually faced with challenges, and we need to learn how to work with them. Is there a way, if there's any chance of happiness or peace or this thing we call liberation, whatever we mean, I'm going to leave it undefined for now. it has to apply to the actual reality of our lives, not just going off into a retreat where we see even be here how it can be sometimes too, but it needs to apply to the actuality of our lives, right? We don't need the Buddha to tell us about suffering. We know all about it, right? We're all experts. What we could use some help on is what to do. That's maybe where we're not. That's the whole practice. So I wanted to offer a few suggestions or thoughts on maybe that I found useful. By the way, this is, if you go on any retreat, generally the first day of a retreat, behind the scenes, the teachers are going to say, who wants to give the hindrance talk? This is a hindrance talk. Because, not always, but typically the first day, I actually commented to some people because I've met with, I don't know how many people individually already in at least 2 groups. Definitely some people have had some difficulties coming up, but most, I would have thought it'd been a lot more. I don't know what's going on out there. So, but I know there's that third of you in the hell realm. Okay. So, and don't worry, you'll be in a heaven realm. Other people will swap your place. It's just how it is, right? Because it's changing. So, look, if there's any possibility for freedom or liberation, it definitely hinges on a foundation of mindfulness. You know, we make so much about mindfulness. It just gets talked about in so many ways and everything. Um, right? First, let me ask you a question. What's the instruction that we've been giving in the meditation for when you're supposed to be with your breath? You just forget the breath and you're just lost off and gone somewhere. What's the instruction? Anybody want to say? Come back, right? Yeah. It's a trick question, but thank you. Someone has to answer, come back to the breath for the trick to work. There is no instruction when you're lost and gone. You're gone. You don't even know you're gone. Don't worry about it. You can't do anything about it. You don't even know. The instruction only kicks in when you're already back and you're at a choice point, right? Then you have some freedom and choice. It's still not always easy because we can be mindful of something, but if the energy of the pull of it is very strong, we have to be very respectful. It's like, I don't know what you have up here in Canada, but we have like rapid transit down in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there's the thing, right? They call it the third rail. There's the 2 rails and you're standing on the platform and right down in there, it's like third rail, high voltage, do not touch. Better respect the energy and power of that, right? These strong forces in us, we need to be very respectful of them because they can take us over. And so when that happens, we have to know it can be like that. And this is kind of what we're working on, loosening and disentangling from these conditioned patterns, but also strengthening our ability to work with them when they are there. So we'll come back to that and say a little more about that, right? But so there's a lot of different definitions about mindfulness. I'll give you my definition. So there's 2 things. There's the practice of mindfulness, which can be many, many things. And then there's the mental state of being mindful or not. Around practice, there's many, many practices. Just what we're saying here, being with the breath, mindfulness of breathing, many, many techniques and methods as far as that goes. My definition of being mindful is not being on automatic pilot. Right? Sometimes when you lose your mindfulness, you get caught up in things. Some people say, "Oh, they went unconscious," and we know what they mean. But actually, think about it. You're not actually unconscious. You're just totally caught and lost and everything. And there's a different feeling, right, when you kind of wake up, if you will, out of that, and you know what's happening. And so you can't control how much of the time you're lost on automatic pilot and how much of the time you're present and awake and clear and know. You can't make it happen. But what we're doing is strengthening. This is what the training we're doing, where over time, and many of you know this, through these practices, it works on us so that we naturally, and if you don't know this, you will come to know this. There are many, many fruits and benefits that come from deepening meditation. I'll try to remember to say more about them. It's a big, big topic. One, and it's only one, but it's a huge one, is that naturally, without you doing anything, you'll become, it shift. So let me back up. I'll come back to that in a second. We all have what I call our set point of the set point of our natural kind of how much we tend to be loving and kind versus cranky, how much time we tend to be reactive versus equanimous, many, many aspects of life of our set point. And we all are oscillating around the set point, right? Like people who know me, like you don't really know me, you kind of see how I am. This is how I am. I'm like a pretty nice guy. Matter of fact, my wife gets mad at me because I'm so dang equanimous. She's pissed off that I'm not getting mad about some certain things. I'm super loving, except when I'm not. I'm full of equanimity, except when I'm not, right? I'm a really nice guy, except when I'm not. It's like that. So we oscillate around our set point. All of us do that, right? So welcome to the club. We can all be not great, okay? But we also can be incredibly beautiful. It's a mix. So what happens is over time, without you necessarily even knowing it, that set where you can think of it moving up or deepening, going whichever direction you like, the set point shifts will still, I don't know if it's good or bad news, but look, everyone is still going to oscillate around your set point. We can have this idealized version that you get to some enlightenment where you're in this perfected thing. I actually can't, no one knows if that's true or not. Nobody knows if that's true or not. You can touch some amazing states of consciousness where in those moments, it's not possible to be in anything except a perfection of love. It's like going to heaven. You can visit, but then you got to go. They're kicked out. So it gets better. We get to a place where over time we're on automatic pilot less and less. And when we are lost, we're less deeply lost. So that's a fruit. Many of you know this for yourself. It just happens for everybody over time of practice. I've found it very strong in my own practice. I consider myself to be of kind of average natural ability for all these meditation, everything. I've just put the time in, that's all. So everybody can do that. That's where we're heading, right? So it gets better, but we have to know that we're also, we need kindness for ourselves because we're not going to be perfect in any of this stuff. We'll still get reactive. It can be like that sometimes. I was going to tell a story, but maybe I'll save it. So then what do we do with this mindfulness? Well, sometimes, and this is where you have to kind of feel it out, just being mindful is enough. Something comes up, we wake up out of automatic pilot, we know what's happening, we sort of shine the light of mindfulness on it, kind of lets go, self-liberates, whatever, we can let go around. It's all that was needed, right? There will be other times when it's just the starting point and we need to have some skillful ways of dealing and working with it, but we had to have the mindfulness to know what's happening so we're not lost in it. And so that'll just depend on what, that's a big topic, right? On what's going on. But the mindfulness is there as a starting point. I remember once I used to, in my previous incarnation, I was an engineer. My degree's in electrical engineering. I worked in Silicon Valley for some of the computer chip, semiconductor companies. And so I was in that kind of that corporate world. one day, and I was super immersed in the Dharma way back then and everything as a meditator and all that. And somebody came up and they had mistaken, they thought it was somebody else, but they thought I had done something. It turned out it wasn't me, but they laid into me. I can remember this. I don't remember what it was, but I mean, it's just like somatically registered in my nervous system of somebody. I mean, he really, and it was interesting. I'm not making any claim to say that I could never get reactive about anything. And no one would blame me if I'd gotten mad and just going, hey, you're being a jerk, stop it. What are you, who would have criticized me? But for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. It happened just on its own in a good way. I just knew mindfully what was happening in the moment. Reactivity didn't even come up. I'm not claiming it could never happen to me, but in this situation, and I just said something like, wow, I mean, I can see you're really mad, but here, let's go find a conference room. Come in, tell me all about it. You can get the feeling. It turned out it wasn't me. I don't even remember what the story was. He was super apologetic. I was just like, it was a good space. I was just like, it's okay. That sounds bad. What happened? I understand. No big deal. It was all good. You feel the difference there? And what a difference it is about mindfulness where like you can be angry and you're having the experience, but you're in it. I call it being all caught in or entangled. And it's a qualitatively different thing than you kind of wake up out of it and you still know you're angry, but you just mindfully know that you're angry. Who knows how you're going to respond still, right? It's a different feeling. So this is kind of what we're growing in the mindfulness. Okay. One piece I want to add in that'll just mention briefly is a few times here I've used the word empathy. That's really one of my favorite. When I think of, we talk about metta, loving kindness and compassion, and these are all like just really beautiful, important qualities. To me, just my own thing, empathy sort of encompasses all that, but it has some more in there. It's like really being able to relate to others, understand. There's something like that, and something about self-empathy too, which I don't know if that's a real thing, but it is for me. We need a lot of this for ourselves. I know it's easy to say, I'm sitting up here, saying be compassionate to yourself, and look, we do the best we can with it. And I know for some of us, it might be easier than others, but okay, I will tell my story. I was on a long retreat. This is a 1-year-long retreat. So you would think and I'm telling you, I was like merging in oneness with all beings and all kinds. It was really good, okay? I mean, it had plenty ups and downs too. I can tell you stories halfway in where I'm burning in hate for everybody, because it can be like that too, right? But it was just great. Then, so you'd think, well, I didn't think I'm enlightened, but it felt like you're kind of in some kind of like enlightened state, right? And you're just kind of being in it. It's really good. So I thought, okay, I was appreciative. An old college friend of mine I hadn't seen for years. Somehow we were still in touch. And so this is in Massachusetts. Somehow I don't remember, but he knew I was there on the retreat. We got back in touch. He lived nearby, and I'm going to cry when I tell this. I could feel the emotion of it. It was so painful because what I did was not good. And it went in, right? It can be like this when we're sensitive. He took me out to lunch. I hadn't spoken for a year. First guy I talked to. I was just, takes me out to lunch. Hadn't changed since we were in college. He's in there, he's got his long hair. I'm not judging. A lot of you have long hair. I used to myself, believe it. And he's like chain smoking marijuana. That's all right. We talked about marijuana last night. It's all good. He's cranking up his reggae. I went back like in a time machine back to how it was back like 50 whatever years ago and everything. And I'm just like, because like you're so sensitive. Took me out to lunch. This was when, during 9/11, when the US invaded Iraq and the whole Abu Ghraib prison thing. That happened when I was on retreat. I didn't know about it. As I'm coming out of retreat, they have saved up all the magazines over the years, and I'm looking, oh my God, just went in. So I was very, very sensitive about our president, George W. Bush. And this is a short story. I'll end in just a minute. Oh, and by the way, I don't assume that we all have the same politics. And I just need to say this. Sorry, the feeling of, it's still echoing to the feeling of, I kind of yelled at the guy, but I was so sensitive. I'll tell you. Most people who come into the Dharma scene tend to be more liberals. I don't know what it is to be a liberal in Canada, but liberals. But not everybody. And sometimes you have to, the conservatives are kind of like hidden conservatives like that. And I don't know about that. I shouldn't, but so I'm just saying how I am, but I'm not telling you, I'm not passing a judgment how anybody else is. And we want it to be safe and inclusive for everyone. We talk about inclusivity in so many ways. But of course, in this scene, we can still like bag on conservatives, right? Or something like that. No. So anyway, I'm not saying right or wrong on the politics, but I'm just telling to make the point. So it turns out he's a super conservative guy. He's a George W. Bush supporter. And what happened was he took me out to lunch and he said something to me like, Richard, I hope you're not going to judge me because I'm a whatever. And I said, Ed, I'm not going to judge you about anything. It's just great to see you. Just don't tell me you're a George W. Bush supporter. Big mistake. And he said, well, I'm sorry to tell you that. But not only am I a George W. Bush supporter, I'm a big George W. Bush supporter. And all that Abu Ghraib prison stuff, it really was just in me. And I stood up. I've never done that in my life. In the restaurant, kind of, he's sitting there over him. He said I only barely raised my voice, but it felt like yelling. And I literally, I'm going to curse because I'm just going to own up. I just said, I hope you don't mind me cursing, but I just said, what the fuck is the matter with you? Have you lost your mind? I don't talk to people like that, especially if 1 week before I'm merging in love with all beings. And now I met an actual being. And what's the first thing that happened? It wasn't good. By the way, he did get a good one back at me, which was pretty good. He said, well, I see what eating all that tofu has done for your mind, which I thought was pretty good. And then I apologized. I got reacted. He and I have a good relationship. It was all good. And we patched it up. I went back in tears. You can see I still have some emotion. It felt so painful to have done that. And I went to Joseph Goldstein, who had been my main teacher. And I just said, it's all been fake for nothing. And what he said to me was so kind. He said, he didn't judge me at all. He just said, we're all a mix of wholesome and unwholesome. And all that happened was you've got a strong equanimity. The sensitivity just ran ahead of the equanimity. That's all that happened. It can be like that. And it got the best of you. And it can be like that. And we have to know we're going to fall flat on our face 1,000 more times. It was so liberating to hear that from him. And it really just, I got the feeling of also like what it's like to be done something that like maybe it wasn't that terrible, but it felt so because I was so sensitive. And to be held just without a judgment and with kindness and love. And I just felt how good that feels. And it just makes me appreciate hopefully the times when I can be that way for other people too, because I know how much it means to me. So this place of being kind and compassion to ourselves when we're dealing with difficulties, knowing how hard it can be is so important. That's really all I wanted to say, right? Because we're all here doing the best we can, and we're all a mix of wholesome and unwholesome. And we're all going to have times when we act in ways that can create suffering. If we're fortunate enough to be able to clean it up with the person or the situation, that's a real blessing, and we try the best we can. For the times we've done something that's not repairable, that's hard, and we have to just, okay, that's how it will be. So and then we really need a lot of the self-compassion, right? Okay. All right. Mindfulness, do the best you can for self-kindness and compassion, whether it's hard or easy, whatever, just the best you can. Maybe we just hold the idea that maybe someday I can be kind to myself. Maybe that's enough. I don't know. Okay. Another thing, it's important to recognize that some experiences are going to be too much for us. That's a pretty obvious thing to say, right? But how many times have you heard, or people will come to me because some other teacher said to them, like, what they're dealing with is, and the teacher just said, well, were you just mindful of it? That was the answer. Not helpful, right? We're all going to have things. I remember a time, I was so young and foolish and naive when I was young. I was so idealistic. I haven't thought about this for years. I was like 20 years old or something, just starting meditating. I went to the dentist. I'm laughing now. It was better than crying 5 minutes ago, I guess. But got a tooth drilled, and he was going to give me the Novocaine. I said, "That's all right. Don't shoot me up." I said something like, he must have thought I was crazy. I'm just going to be mindful at whatever sensations arise and pass away. I mean, that's not situationally appropriate to some dentist who thinks you're just crazy. So I don't know what he thought. So I drilled the tooth without Novocaine. I don't remember if I asked him at some point I think the imprint of my fingers are still pressed in the armrest if he still got that chair. It wasn't even close. I mean, that's a pretty obvious example. Like, it just kicked the bejeebies out of me. And I don't remember if I hung in there or what I did was. It's just like, well, that was a mistake, right? We all have situations that they're just too much for us. The way I think about it is kind of an image. It's like there's a circle, and imagine yourself at the center of the circle. And then however big or small the circle is, it contains all of our experiences for which we're able to be with in a way that's, well, to be present with it in a way without struggle. But if it gets too much, what goes outside our edge, it's not a judgment. It's just outside the edge. And then it's a different strategy needed. So another way to, maybe the mind of a Buddha, I don't know, is there's no edge or something, I don't know. The way, one way to think about practice, the many ways, is it's like expands out the edge. So we're able to find the liberation and the inner peace, or whatever words you like, the enlightenment in a wider and wider range of the experience of our life. So that's a real fruit, and it feels great. Things, so many people, many of you, I'm sure, so many people I do myself, look back on life, and if you're wondering if there's ever fruit and benefit in your meditation, if anything's going to ever happen, for those of you who've been practicing or maybe just living long enough, look back in your life. Is there anything, you don't have to answer, it's more of just putting the question out for you. Is there anything in your life, even one thing that you can say, I used to really struggle about this one thing, but I'm actually a lot better about that than it used to be. There's real liberation right there. Real fruit from your practice, right? I mentioned something, was I talking about when I'd have, where things can come up, where it used to be like self-esteem things would come up. I could take many forms. I felt I was so broken. I just despaired I'd ever really get out from under that. And, I did some psychotherapy, and I really put a lot onto the practice. And then it wasn't until I really was in kind of my mid-30s, I looked back and said, oh yeah, I used to kind of just be consumed in just like my suffering and my despair, and it's kind of evaporated away. I think I still can, you have the echoes of the wounds, I think still, but I'm not saying I can never, I don't want to be hubris and think, but it's like pretty good, right? I didn't notice what wasn't there, but that's an example of things can really shift that are conditioned very, very deeply, actually. It can really shift. It can feel like, gosh, I've been doing this practice for 10 years. It's hanging on. My pathology is still hanging on, but things can move. And many of you, I hope, know that in some areas, things have shifted. So there's that. But we want to really be respectful of when things are too much outside of our circle. And the way I like to articulate it, and it's not a judgment, it's just a fact. This is not like I should be with it or anything. So And when we recognize that, it's a different. So when we're meditating, for example, say you're sitting and with your breath, and I'm just use whatever, knee pain. If we always move every time there's the slightest discomfort, we never learn to be with and let go around and work with difficulties. So if we're moving too quickly, we miss it's not that big of a deal, but you're just missing some opportunities you may not think of them as opportunities when you're in your suffering, but it is to see, can I work with this? Can I be with this? Can I let it be? Or not? If not, that's okay. That's giving you information and you're learning. Oh, no, I can't. Oh, what's that all about? So we learn. But if we take it too far the other side, there might be time. So rather than it could have served us better to hang in with it longer. But if we're out of balance on the other side, it's like we hung in with it longer than it really served us, and we ended up with a lot of unnecessary suffering. We really should have stretched your leg out, just out of kindness to yourself. I remember I haven't done a lot of real longest I've ever sits have been 3 hours. And, when I've gotten deep in, I could do that some. And I remember the first time this shows you how defiled my mind is. I was sitting and I'd been sitting for an hour. It's like, I'm doing okay. I get the hour and a half. I'm really concentrated. This is good. I'm thinking, I'm going to keep going. Got to 2 hours, I think. And, okay, hour and a half is starting to hurt. By 2 hours, it hurt. But I thought, I'm going to keep going here. And then when I got closer, I said, I'm going to go for 3 hours. I think my mind was so corrupted, it actually said something like, I'm going to bag 3 hours. What? I just want to be able to say I sat for 3 hours. What's the point of that? So at the end, I did do it, but I was like on the dentist, it wasn't as bad as a dentist chair, but I was just, I don't know, puffing it out. What's the point of that? So it can be like this. So learning to recognize, and there's a gray zone where we may not know if it's if in or out of our circle. That's okay. That's just part of learning through experience, and you don't have to get it perfect, but just a little bit to bring some awareness for that. Okay. So a few tips I've been throwing out. We need our mindfulness. You use it the best you can, right? Just repeating, can't make it be there. Bring as much of the bubble of love with yourself as you can. You just do your best. You don't have to judge how well or poorly you can do it. It just is what it is. Be kind to yourself the best you can. Even if it feels like it's feeble, that's okay. Just your best. Recognizing experiences can be too much for us sometimes. And so you work with it the best way. Okay, here's another thing. This will be tougher. It could be helpful not to judge your meditation by how pleasant or unpleasant it is. So look, what's a good meditation? What's a bad meditation? Come on, let's be honest. We all know. We all know what a bad meditation and a good meditation. It's a good meditation is you're getting your way. Bad meditation is not getting your way. That's all it is, right? And people will often say, my meditation was going great, and then it all fell apart. It didn't fall apart. There is literally, this is so important. I know I can say it, and it's just going to bounce off, and I even need to hear it myself. So I'm not saying I'm beyond this either. There's no such thing as a bad meditation. There's simply what is happening in the present moment. In case you haven't noticed, whatever experience you've had changes. Again, I want to be respectful. If you're dealing with a chronic pain or a chronic something, I hope I'm not triggering some people off. I know that I don't have an expertise there, and I don't want to sit and try to tell you what your experience is. I don't know about that. So you might be the one to come up and could give the talk on how you work with chronic things about that. So, and that's I want to be respectful of that. Okay. And there's all the experiences that do. They change, they come and go. Just last week, somebody who I work with, I'm in a meditation teacher role, went on a retreat at a retreat center, but they wanted to work with me as their meditation teacher. So told the people at the center it was fine. And they would call me a couple of times a week, and I would do the practice discussions with them there. And so they were on a 2-week retreat. And it was kind of just amazing what was happening, because they were going through whatever and they had good concentration. And then he called me one day and he said, golden light that sounded pretty nice. Golden light came and just filled his body with golden light. I'd like that. Next day, he called me again. He used a different word. He said it changed. He goes, I didn't ask him what he meant. Divine light came and filled his body, and his body became a light of vibration and divine light. I was thinking, I even got comparing mine going, like, that's not happening to me. Then the next day he called me one more day and he said it even got more. A shaft of divine light, and I think he even said straight to God or something like that. I don't know. I didn't get into what do you mean by God. It was just like, I didn't need to get into it. It's just like, what am I going to tell them? It's just like, whatever you're doing, just keep doing that, and you don't need me to. Next day he calls me up. So he was calling because it was cooking, right? My meditation has fallen apart. Whatever. I don't remember. I hate my mother. I don't know, all this stuff. His body's hurting. Instead of a body of light, it was like a body of like twisted knots or something like that. And he was just mad and whatever. And that was actually the whole rest of the retreat for about another 5 days. So things can be like that. Actually, things happen, and maybe it needed to sort of release, and then it gave way for something deeper that needed to come up. Right? We go through cycles, by the way. This is a whole nother topic. Purity and purification. It's kind of tricky words, so I don't want to trigger you off, but like purity was like being in, divine lights. You're immersed in divine light. I'd call that purity. Sometimes when the difficulties are coming up, it's now a purification that has to happen. So it can be like that. So, and then we had a whole discussion to work with. Well, it's like, my retreat's ruined. It all fell apart. It didn't fall apart. Now it's just this. And the whole thing, it's kind of a cliche, but we don't just mean this as sort of a feel-good way of talking. Literally, if we could really get this, it's the whole Dharma. There's just this present moment is unfolding. It's just amazing, miraculous when you think of just being alive and pure existence and awareness, and it's just revealing itself. And the whole question is, how do I just work what's needed now? If divine light's entering your body, you'll have to make your own choice, but I'm guessing nothing's needed. Just appreciate whatever gave rise to that, By the way, don't get comparing mine, because I don't know if anybody's ever told me divine light's into their body. That's kind of but it can happen, right? You'll have your own version. Right? When it changed, it just changed. That's the teaching. What's the skillful way to work with a body that's achy, or a mind that's chasing back after some experience, knowing that nothing's going to last anyway. And I'm still chasing that, trying to get back and creating suffering when all I have to do is learn to let go. And right. So these are the teachings. We learn that not to judge it by, it's interesting. I'm thinking back. I just had a memory. Many times I've been on retreat and I was just in a good sit. I was concentrated. My body was good, and the bell would ring. And I remember I'd think, I'm just going to sit and be with this for a little while longer, sit another 15, 20 minutes. I don't know how many times my body's hurting, mentally, whatever's going on. I'm falling asleep. I'm restless. I've got emotional stuff coming. It's just hard. The bell rings and I say, no, I think I'm going to sit and be with this another 15 minutes, right? Probably not that many times, but maybe that could have been useful. All right. Um, just a little bit more coming towards the end. That ties into a bigger question about the whole Dharma. So this is trying to be working with difficulties and challenges and maybe a few tips. It's really about learning to let go, learning to just, with a kind heart, recognizing what's happening, recognizing how we can get caught. When we're aware of it, can we find a way to let go and just be present and work with things skillfully? Adding more tools in our toolkit so that we'll have more skill when things come up. That's kind of what we're talking about, right? This is actually training for regular life because it's the same thing in regular life. What is it? I hope I'm not, I'm just assuming, I feel pretty confident that we're all doing as human beings, right? We're all trying to get more pleasant experiences and less. Is there anyone here trying to have less of what you want happen, less of what you want happen to you and more of what you don't want happen to you? No. I mean, it's silly, right? This is being a human being. Our whole lives are about uh, um, whether we're conscious or not of it. It's the whole Dharma, right? About aiming to have more and more pleasant experiences, less and less unpleasant. I don't think we're going to stop doing that, right? There's a story that Ajahn uh, um, uh, Cha if you know who he was, he's no longer alive. He was a very well-known Thai monk and meditation master, and his talks were some of them were recorded and then transcribed. So if you can look up and get them all for free, Chah, Cha, and just wonderful stuff. I really sometimes I'd go on retreat. I didn't do a lot of reading, but I'd bring a book and just occasionally I just open up and read a paragraph for inspiration. He tells a story at a monastery where they lived in these little kutis, the huts, and a storm had come and blown, and the roof had collapsed in on one of the huts. And somebody came and told Ajahn Chah about it and said, and the monk's not repairing his kuti. And Ajahn Chah tells a story, went to the monk and said, what are you doing? You're and when it be the sun, he would just kind of scoot under the collapsed roof there a little bit. And Chah said, you kind of reprimanded him, said, you got to take care of business and got to take care of yourself. And the monk said something like, I don't know what you want from me. I even let go this much and you're still not happy. And then Ajahn Chah said something like, well, then why do you even bother scooting out of the sun to get under the shade at all? And Ajahn Chah said something like, people can be so stupid like this, that we have to take care of ourselves. So I don't think anyone's asking us to, and we're not going to stop trying your best to change your circumstances. I think it would be foolish to stop doing that. And I hope, right? You're going to keep trying to get what you want. But then we're just adding a piece that's saying, in the end, you get what you get. And so the whole question is, what are we going to do with you get what you get? So that's in life, that's here on the retreat. That's kind of a question, right? You're going to sit down, you're going to try to be comfortable. You're doing these practices. We'll see what happens over the coming days about settling and all that. And then you're going to get what you get. What are you going to do? And are there ways where we can find the liberation, right? The letting go right in the middle of things? That's kind of the answer. So, one way to think about it, by the way, it's kind of like, here's another way to say it. You can look for yourself at what amount of your happiness and well-being is tied up in the nature of the experience itself, having or not having a certain experience. And it's going to be a lot for all of us, right? So again, we're going to keep that. But you can add in the piece. What we're really saying is getting interested in how am I relating to what's going on? And that's kind of a liberation piece where we can shift, yes, what's happening, but get more interested in how am I relating to what's happening? And that can be a place to really shift, and it can be really quite freeing to realize, oh, I'm able to shift my relationship with this, as long as it's within inside our circle, of course. So just two more things. Quick things. There's a story from Ajahn Chah that I like a lot. It's an image he uses of growing a chili bush. And he says, our meditation practice is like growing a chili bush. He goes, you prepare the soil, you plant the seed, you water it, protect it from insects, from the wind, whatever. Give it sun. You've put in your part. How fast it grows, that's not your business. You can't do anything about it. That's nature, right? He says, but what we do is on meditation, we want to plant the seeds, have it grow, flower, and produce chilies in one day. He says, you can't go stretching on the leaves trying to make them grow. And I like that image because I think it's something we can really carry. I know it's not easy, but if we can bring that idea of we put in our part, the part that you have some control over. This is the world we're in now, right? If a cell phone doesn't go off at least once during a Dharma talk, it's just not, it's incomplete. Somebody told me a story of, and it's hard to imagine what was happening, of some well-known monk. I think it was at Spirit Rock or something, giving a talk in front of, and a cell phone went off and he picked it up. This is what somebody did tell me this. It's hard to imagine, but, and actually said, sorry, I can't talk. I'm giving the Dharma talk right now. Put the talk right there. So somebody's persistent too. They're not giving up. Anyway, so it can be like that if we can bring that. So the last piece I want to just say is this something about, given all of this, I hope we get the feeling, kind of bringing the metta in, of being kind with ourselves. Maybe it's an alarm. Well, what we'll do is this. If it's okay with you, I've got one last thing about self-judgment. It's super quick, a minute or two. We'll move into a walking. No, it's a sitting. Is it? So it's a sitting meditation. So what we'll do is, you might be meditating on sound. If we'll try to, we'll try to get it fixed. Wow. Hey, whatever that was, you fixed it. So here's the thing. Let me just say this thing about self-judging ourselves, because I think it's important, and it'll cut a little bit into the sit. And then you have your sit till dinner. Oh, and by the way, I'm the sit leader for this next sit, but I'm going to go up, and someone's scheduled to have a one-on-one with me. So I'm going to go up and do it. I'll make sure I'm down in half an hour. Don't worry to ring the bell to end. Somebody won't be sitting up here. I'll come. So, we use this word judging and comparing and all that, which is different, as I said earlier, about having a discernment, which is kind of a judgment, but it's different. And, there's this idea in the Pali tradition about this word manas, which is conceit. And it's interesting because in there, the Buddha is quoted as saying, if you think you're better than someone, that's conceit. But then it's interesting, he says, if you think you're less than someone, it's conceit. And if you think you're equal to someone, it's conceit. That's kind of interesting. What does it mean? It's this conceit of being so absorbed with, how am I doing? It's like a self-absorption, right? And comparing. And so, right? So you can look for yourself. What percentage of your thoughts in life are some version of, it's an experiment if you've never done it, some version of, how am I doing? Am I okay? I'm not okay. How am I going to be okay? But it's just that kind of strategizing. It can be a lot for some of us, right? It's like a self-absorption. So it's trying to get us to step out of that paradigm. And so the Buddhists have the suggestion about not getting in this judging mind about ourselves. Discernment's okay. Since probably many of us are going to end up judging anyway, it's just a tendency that can happen. I just want to leave you with something that I really feel strongly, because most of our judging is just, you're an expert on your lived experience of yourself, of course. You're the least qualified on the story you tell. You are not qualified. I'm serious here to make the judgment. You're not objective, right? You're not objective. That's all. So if you're going to judge yourself anyway, I hope you can make a shift rather than how well or poorly, good or bad you think you're doing it, whatever it is. Judge yourself by your intention, your good intention. How well or poorly it manifests, that's just the conditioned pattern of our mind. That's what we're working on. That's what we're all working on. It's our good, beautiful intentions, though, even when I was speaking, yelling at my friend after my retreat, my good intention was still there, just got covered over. I lost connection with it, that's all. So the more we can connect with our good intention, that speaks actually more truly about you. And we've already been talking about everybody here, you won't go on a whole big thing again about it, it's like, is filled with good, beautiful intentions. Wanting to live in a way, or how do I say it? Creating less suffering and more happiness and well-being. Nobody here would say they don't want to do that. That's a pretty beautiful thing. So if you're going to judge, go back to that. It might generate less suffering and actually be more accurate. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought. Okay, so thank you. We just went over, actually it was less than a 1 hour talk, given that we did some other stuff in the beginning. So yeah. So I appreciate your kind attention. We'll move away from all the words now. And again, it's 5 after 5, so we have 25 minutes. I will come back, as I said, and ring the bell to end just before dinner time. So however you use the time, sitting, walking, whatever. Okay.